Michelle Griffiths, and I'm a health psychologist and a research fellow in long-term conditions. And I specialise in rare and hard-to-treat conditions, particularly those with an autoimmune basis, so including thyroid disease, but also lupus and other conditions. I'm here to talk to you today about the psychosocial impacts of living with thyroid eye disease and to offer you some tools and techniques to support you from the perspective of a psychologist. I know that you've had a long morning this morning listening to the science, so I also want to offer you the opportunity for some time to think about yourself, your own life, and to engage in a guided practice to close the event. So before we start, this session will offer some time to think about your own situation. If you do want to gather a pen and paper, or you want to open some notes on your phone, that's fine, and take some notes. If you do want any of the slides that I'm sharing today, please let me know. And if you want any more information on any of those things, I can get you some more detailed information. So just quickly, I want to introduce to you what health psychologists are. Most people don't know what a health psychology is, so that you have some idea. I'm a registered psychologist and I work alongside clinical and counselling psychologists. Specifically, the role of a health psychologist like me is to help people to adapt to the psychological and emotional aspects of health and illness. And I support people who are chronically ill with a range of therapeutic modalities. We promote healthy lifestyles and try to help people to improve their health. That's when people are well, or when we're diagnosed with a condition. Sometimes it's really hard to think about improving our health when we feel really unwell. Also, for example, let's just come back, things like stopping smoking will come into this, which is actually really important for many people with thyroid eye disease. And we also try to improve the healthcare system as much as we can through research and co-production. And we may also work with your healthcare teams to promote psychologically informed communication. So, what do we know? We know, as psychologists, that the impacts, all of your clinicians know that the impacts of thyroid eye disease are really wide and far-reaching and not just contained to the specific symptoms of the body. So it's a bit like when we drop a pebble in the water and we can see the ripples coming through. In early research, we know that, for example, and this was corroborated by the questionnaire that was sent out before this event, that up to 85% of people living with thyroid eye disease report difficulty reading, for example. 77% report changes in appearance. 70% report difficulties with driving. We know that 71% of people are likely to report changes in their self-esteem as one of their primary concerns. And we know that people with thyroid eye disease are up to 7 times more likely than others to need time off work. 63% are known to experience psychological distress, and 71% report confidence has been negatively impacted. So we also know that many people suffer relatively in silence, especially those with thyroid eye disease. And research shows that people often hold back when talking to medical teams. In one survey, around 3 in 5 patients found it difficult to talk to their doctor about the impact that thyroid eye disease has on their daily lives. More than half of TED, I'm going to call it TED for now, half of TED patients rate their emotional well-being or their quality of life, depending on the scales that are used, as fair or poor or the equivalent in various measures. So what can we do about all of this? In my experience of working with people with long-term conditions, I know that it's really difficult at times to secure research funding to develop specific services and resources for rare conditions. And it's sometimes easier for more well-known conditions. This is what makes the charitable sector so valuable, because we're able to come together to provide information independently of whether we have private or research funding. So firstly, I'd like to thank the BTF, the Thyroid Trust, TED-CT for creating this day, and for all of you for being here. So working with patients, one thing I hear regularly is that the impact of being diagnosed with a long-term condition feels long and messy, a bit like this ball of string here, with so many factors that can all be entwined together. So when we're supporting our psychological and emotional well-being, it can be really helpful to use this metaphor and start to think of ways to untangle the string so that we can start to focus on small parts of this puzzle to make larger impacts on our own psychosocial well-being. So one of the things that we can do is to understand what we call the biopsychosocial model. And this model splits some of the problems that we face into broad areas so that we can really start to think about how we might take some positive steps to help ourselves. So firstly, the biological refers to all of the symptoms, the medications, the physical limitations, the genetic predispositions that we're dealing with. Psychological refers to the thoughts, the emotions, the patterns of behaviours that we may go through during this whole period. And we know there are different times: pre-diagnosis, which is when we're seeking information; diagnosis, which is when we have a shock and we have lots of information that we take some of it in, but not all of it. And often we don't know how to apply it. And then we have management stages, relapse stages. So there are different processes that we go through at different stages of this journey. But in terms of the psychological impacts, this might be low mood or worry or social isolation, feeling that we're alone, but maybe hope or relief. It also relates to the behaviours that we engage in, like whether we withdraw from our social worlds through fear of judgment or negative comments. Or it might relate to how we adapt to our medication routines, the thoughts and feelings that we have about those medications, the belief about how effective they may be. Our social and environmental element of this model relates to the ways that we interact with the world around us and how these are impacted when our health is changed. So that might be our ability to drive a car. It might be the impact that it has on a specific relationship or a wider range of relationships, particularly at work, for example. It might talk about our ability to engage in our hobbies and work. It might also, social often encompasses an environmental element as well. So when we think about the social and environmental impacts, it might be the way that we navigate around our homes and whether we need extra support to adapt our homes going forward, or whether we need to think about other adaptations in our environment. Separating the impact of our condition into these areas can really be a good starting point to help us to untangle this kind of ball of string and to think about smaller chunks, we call it chunking, think about smaller chunks of the impact that our condition has on us. Some issues might fit into more than one box. So, for example, anxiety might be biological if we are experiencing an overactive thyroid. It might be psychological if it relates to panic or generalized anxiety about our day-to-day things, or it might be specifically related to one issue. For example, in the social box, it might be that we think that people are looking at us and judging us and talking about our changed appearance. So we might then have anxiety related to going out into the social world. This model can be really helpful for unpicking what we think is going on. It's a really good opportunity to sit and reflect on the ways that we're feeling and the things that are happening to us. It might be that one area is more problematic than others, and it might also start to give us clues about the types of actions that are required to help us problem solve the experiences that we're having. Once we start to untangle the impacts of our health on our life, we often find that one area shows up as more difficult than others. And this might change over time or in different situations. So on this slide, there's a tool that we call COGS. This tool is helpful for putting one key issue in the middle. So for some people, the issue might be something like anxiety. For others, we might write in isolation or pain or workplace stress. Whatever it is that we feel is really impacting us in that moment. The cogs are really useful for helping to unravel this ball of string because they help us to understand how to make small and meaningful changes to start to tackle the problems. We might have more than one set of cogs to work with over time. So when I will work therapeutically, we can identify the particular issue we want to work on with our cogs. So for example, with anxiety, we then pop that in the middle. You can think of the cogs a bit like a stuck clock, and the main cog has rusted up and the smaller cogs around it have also rusted. If we identify and work on the smaller cogs, it's a bit like applying oil. We can start to move some of these smaller cogs, and hopefully over time we can start to make an impact on the main cog in the middle. Some examples of the small cogs might be worries about our relationship, difficulty talking to our boss at work, feeling unsteady when we're on the stairs, or changes to driving. Or it might be our own kind of behaviours, like not reaching out to friends and withdrawing. One of the benefits of using a tool like the cogs within a therapeutic session is when we map out all of the things that we're experiencing, we can understand why sometimes this condition, or any condition really, can feel so heavy to hold. We can see it all in front of us. This is a map of the things that I'm going through. And we can start to think about how to make small changes referring to each little cog. And when we focus and break it down into the smaller cogs, we can start to think about what kind of help and support we might need for different cogs. One example is nutrition, for example. People often say, I really, especially with autoimmune disease, I really don't know what I should be eating. There are so many arguments out there, and I can go down a rabbit hole every time I try and work out what's good food and what's bad food. So we can pop that into one of the smaller cogs, and really brainstorm, what is it I need to start to move this cog to help me move this bigger one in the middle? Is it nutritional support? Is it health navigation? What is it I need to start to move this cog? So looking for our strengths can be a way to start to help to move things forward. This daisy in the middle shows us where there are opportunities to create well-being. What we would do in a therapeutic setting is to rate ourselves on the different petals. There are a couple of unlabeled petals because it gives us the opportunity to think about what are the sources of well-being that are important to us as individuals. So we can start to rate our well-being from 1 to 10 in these different parts of our lives. For example, you might score yourself low on health, but you might be higher in other areas like family, if that was a petal, or our spiritual well-being. To help you use this model, and I can make this presentation will be available, but also we can provide additional information around these models if you like. One of the goals is not to sort of treat it like a game of sort of almost like Ludo, where we're always trying to push every petal up the scale. It might be for a while that we want to work on one petal, and for example, our financial well-being, but we know that there are other petals that might come down the scale while we focus on one at a time. So it gives us some idea of where we're doing well, where we're not doing so well. And we can also ask ourselves the questions that we've got here when we're using this approach, which are, what are the positives that I've got going for me in my life? What are the good things? What are the things that are stopping my problems getting worse? What are the things that are supporting me through this? What are the personal strengths? It's really important to recognize what you're bringing and your contribution to this and your own kind of brilliance. What are the personal strengths that are really helping me through? What am I bringing to others in my life despite what I'm going through? What is going well at the moment? This is a technique from CBT which helps us to reframe our thoughts away from our struggles with what we're losing or what we've lost to what we do have in life and what we also have as our personal strengths. So I'd also like to introduce you today to a mindfulness practice. I did ask through the Facebook group if anybody would like to learn a little bit about mindfulness, and I think quite a few people did. So I'm going to have a quick go. I really hope the puppy doesn't bark. I've tried to tire her out in the meantime. So just introducing mindfulness for you. Mindfulness is a really simple form of meditation, and it can help us to reduce the effect of our difficult thoughts and feelings by focusing on our breath and what's happening in our bodies, rather than being overwhelmed by the thoughts and the feelings that we have. So one example of mindfulness was during lockdown. I looked, it feels like a long time ago now, I looked out of my window into the garden, and my brain immediately said, oh my goodness, this grass is overgrown. The trampoline is broken and ripped. I need to cut those brambles back. I need to unscrew that trampoline. Where's my spanner? Now I have to think about, how do I get to the tip in lockdown? Do I need a certain day that I have to go? Do I have to book? Suddenly I recognize all of the noise that's in my head just from looking out through the window. Whereas when I looked down, my daughter, who was small at the time, and her cat were happily in the garden, sat looking at a flower and chalking on the floor. They were really, really in the moment in that garden, whereas my mind had gone into the garden through the window and had been at the tip, and it had been in a booking system on the internet, and it had started to think about all of the tasks, all of the things that I needed to do. And when we start to recognize that, we can start to bring some peace, because our minds wander about 50% of the time or more. But every time we practice being mindful, we're exercising our attention muscle, and we're becoming mentally fitter. We can take more control over the focus of our attention and what we would like to choose to focus on, rather than more passively and automatically allowing our attention to be dominated by the things that distress us and the things that take us away from the present moment that we're in. So mindfulness can be simply described as choosing and learning to control our focus of attention. An example of the automacy of our thoughts is sometimes when we're driving in the car. If we're driving on automatic pilot, we might not really be aware of the scenery or the things that we're doing. I moved house a few months ago, and the number of times that I ended up at my old house rather than my new house because my mind was elsewhere, thinking about things that I had to do, and I wasn't really present. I was present with the driving, but not really with the journey. I was going somewhere that was at the back of my mind. So becoming more aware of our thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations from moment to moment, we give ourselves some mindful activity to be really present in the moment where we are, and not in the past, which is done,
I was just paying bills.
and not in the future,
Yeah,
which hasn't been written yet.
You just saw that thing. Dreams. No, it's dreams.
Are we okay? Are we okay? So an easy way to start mindfulness practice, if anybody wants to have a go, is to choose a fairly mundane activity, maybe not driving, but one of the activities that we often recommend is washing the dishes. So if we're washing the dishes each evening, we might start to get in our heads as we're washing up because it's something we regularly do and we know how to do. And that can be a time where our worries and our thoughts, what we've done in the day, concerns about future events, regretful thoughts, can jump in. So one of the things that we can do is just set aside a couple of minutes a day when we're doing a really mundane activity to come back into this moment and really notice the temperature of the water, how it feels on our skin, the texture of the bubbles, any sounds of the water pouring, the textures on the plates and the cups, and really just noticing what we might not normally notice. A mindful walk is another time to experience the now. Walking is something that most of us do at some time during the day. We can practice, even if it's only for a minute or 2 minutes at a time, mindful walking. Rather than being in our own heads, we can start to look around and notice. We can use our senses to note the things that we see, the things that we hear, the things that we can smell, the things that we can touch, potentially the things we can taste, but not usually. And we can notice the sensations in our body, the movement of our feet, our arms, our legs, our heads as we take each step forward. What this isn't is trying to suppress your thoughts, trying to completely clear your mind. The more we try to suppress our thoughts, the bigger they get and the louder they shout at us. But it's about coming back to the moment, even just for a few seconds, noticing what can I see, what can I hear. Even if it's just for a few seconds, we can start to relieve some of our suffering and be in the now. So I'm going to, and it seems the piece is holding still, to deliver a very, very quick mindful practice with you. Even if my puppy barks, and even if the builders who are outside start to make a noise, that's okay, because mindfulness isn't designed to be done in a quiet room when we have time, because let's be honest, there's very few moments in life when we are sat in a quiet room with nothing to do and plenty of time. So mindfulness is actually designed to be done on the bus or at work or whenever we want to just come back to the now. So whatever noise is going on around you, it's okay to use this practice. So mindful breathing primarily focuses, so mindful meditation, primarily focuses on your breath and your breathing. However, the goal is to try to develop some calm and non-judgmental awareness of the now. We allow our thoughts to come in and we allow any physical sensations in the body to come in. That might be pain, it might be discomfort. We allow all of those things in, but we develop awareness so that we don't get caught up in them. We notice them and we allow them to go while we bring our attention back to the now. So if you would like to engage in this activity, just feel free to put your pen and paper down. You can sit comfortably wherever you are and have your eyes open or closed. You can have your spine reasonably straight if that is comfortable for you. And if possible, you can place your feet on the floor so that you're grounded in the now. In this moment, just direct your attention now to your breathing. Just notice your own breath in this moment. Whenever your thoughts, your emotions, your physical sensations, or sounds around you come in, just accept them. Even if your thought is, this is boring and a waste of time, that's okay, it's the thought. Allow it in, notice it, accept it, just come back to your breath. For your thoughts, give the sounds space to come and go. Give them space without judging them or getting involved in them. Just notice them. And then come back to your breath. When you notice your attention has drifted off and you're becoming caught up in your own thoughts or feelings, just note that your attention's drifted. Really gently bring that attention back to your breath. It's completely normal and natural for your thoughts to arise and for your attention to follow them. No matter how many times this happens, all we need to do is bring our attention back to your breathing. In a couple of seconds, I'm just going to get you to bring your awareness back into your fingers, into your toes, into the moment, into the room. If you've got your eyes closed, do be prepared for it to be bright and light out here when you open them. And that is a very simple mindful practice for our lunchtime today. As we become more practiced at using mindfulness for breathing, we can learn to be mindful of our thoughts and feelings and to become observers and to be more accepting of our thoughts and our physical sensations. This can help over time with this practice to result in less distressing feelings, and it increases our ability to enjoy our lives, particularly in the now, especially when the past and the present feel so uncertain. With mindfulness, even the most disturbing sensations, feelings, thoughts, and experiences can be viewed from a wider perspective as passing events in the mind rather than defining us or being necessarily true. When we're more practiced in using mindfulness, we can use it even in times of intense distress and becoming more mindful of the actual experience as an observer. We can use our mindful breathing and focus our attention on the breathing. We can listen to our distressing thoughts mindfully and recognize them as mere thoughts, not statements of facts, just thoughts, and breathing with them and allowing them to happen without believing them and without arguing with them. Just electrochemical impulses in the brain. And if our thoughts are too strong or too loud, then we can move our attention to the breath or body that surrounds us. So we can take the metaphor of waves to help to explain what we've just practiced. Think of your mind as the surface of a lake or an ocean, and there are always going to be waves on the water. Sometimes they're going to be big, sometimes they're small, sometimes they seem too much. But the waves are churned up by the winds, which come and go in every direction and change in intensity, as do the winds of our stress and the changes of our lives, which stir up these waves in our mind. It's possible to find some shelter from much of the wind that agitates the mind. And whatever we might do to prevent them, the winds of life and the mind will still blow. So it's about being able to be in the moment while that churns around us. Learning to surf those waves. So thank you for listening to the session today. I'm going to stop sharing and just come back into the room.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. I really loved your last slide as well. That was really relatable for me.
Thank you. And I just thought at the end of the day, hopefully we could go into the afternoon, the afternoon, feeling peaceful. One of the other slides that I would have put on was some support, some link to support. But I know that that's happening already. And I wonder if anyone else in this session has got a link to the resources that you were going to share. I don't want to repeat what you're already going to share.
Yeah, I was going to say in the resources section, just to go over some of the things you mentioned about in your initial slide, in like the areas that can be impacted by your mental well-being and areas that can cause potential additional stress. And as a thyroid patient myself, we and from the thyroid community that help represent, it's we know that it's that thing of stress is a factor, but thyroid, having diagnosis and managing the journey of your thyroid disease can also cause stress. So it's like a vicious circle. One of the things that's in the resources for everybody down the bottom in the resources section is actually a toolkit which has been created to help thyroid patients have conversations at work about how to talk to their employer, about how they can seek support, how the employer, so it's for employees and employers, how they can help each other, how they can have those conversations, and also what the employers can do for the employees and how they can support them to make it easier and maybe help them with some of the challenges that they're experiencing. One of the questions that's come up is about access to support for anyone that is struggling with their mental well-being at any stage through their thyroid journey, because it's, you know, you have, like you mentioned, the initial feeling unwell and the symptoms that causes. We talked about anxiety and depression and those things, and then also potentially the shock that comes with the diagnosis or the relief for a lot of patients. And then as you go through the journey and you navigate, there's lots of ups and downs. Lots of patients describe it as a roller coaster, and it's about how they can access support if they are struggling. So I don't know if you've got any advice on that, Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, it's really important to remember that different types of support are needed at different times. So, you know, it's, you know, navigating the health service can be a real minefield, can't it? You know, trying to get a diagnosis and going from pillar to post and starting to wonder, am I making some of this up? Is there something, you know, wrong with me? And then we get this diagnosis, and that can be shocking or it can be relieving. But usually that's a time when so much information comes in, and sometimes we can only remember 5% of what we're told in a consultation. So support looks different in different times, and using sort of primary care and using the health navigation services where we can is really key to try and get through the NHS, to try and get to the specialists that we need. That's where peer support can come in, really is really important as well, because that's where we can find out where the specialist centres are, or who's seen a specialist that has really made a difference to them, and that's the kind of support. When we are you know, experiencing diagnosis, it's about getting the information, which is why all of these charities are such a wonderful thing, and we support them because that information is there to revisit as many times as we need afterwards, because sometimes we are so stressed and anxious we can't take that information in. So it's about revisiting that information. many patients then come back to peer support, not to be frightened of the worst case scenario, but often peer support can be really helpful in living tips, daily living tips. Things like, have you accessed occupational therapy? Have you had any changes made to your home? What about the products that are out there that can cost the earth to trial and error different products that might help us? Finding out what's worked for who, that's a really useful place to use peer support. And then talking therapies can come in at any time, really, through this period. But often people find that talking therapies can be quite helpful as well at the end of this process, as a sort of biographical rebuilding where we kind of reflect back on, gosh, what just happened to my identity, to my changes in self, to the mental health that I experienced, which I may or may not have experienced before, and how we can start to put back together all this fragmentation and start to rebuild our biography and our sense of self so that we can go forward, probably not the same person that we were before, but a person in the now, that kind of mindful practice, like, who am I right now and how can I rebuild myself with everything I've learned, everything I've been through, and everything I'm still going through to go forward. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things we always, when we talk to the patient community and we do our peer support sessions, is we always talk about potentially at appointments, if you're able to, taking someone with you, because you mentioned that overwhelm at diagnosis and the information. Generally, at that point, you're most unwell as well. So
Yeah.
it's a lot to take on board and to remember, because you get such a short period of time to take in an awful lot of information.
Absolutely. And one of the things that seems quite simple, that seems to work really well in the research and the clinical work I do, people always bring up this idea that, well, when I speak to particularly primary care, I'm only allowed to talk about one thing, one symptom, and I'll probably get one drug for it. How do I communicate these things that are quite systemic, particularly autoimmune diseases? How do I start to talk about the patterns of things that are happening to me, not just that individual symptom at the time? And one of the things that patients find quite useful, and we may be looking at in a rheumatology setting going forward, is just simply drawing almost like a gingerbread person and drawing on the areas of the body that we're experiencing different things. So when the GP says, what's the one thing you want to talk about today? So, well, it's this picture. It's how these things all are like that ball of string, are all entwined together. And actually, when I experience my migraines and I also experience low mood, and then I can't, the social impact, going back to that biopsychosocial model, actually it might be the pain that's the primary problem, but it causes my secondary suffering, right? Because then I can't do this with my family, or I'm worried about getting the sack at work. And we can start to then use these types of tools to communicate, to think to ourselves, actually, is it the appearance changing issue that I'm going through at the moment, or is it the fear of my relationship breaking down? Is it, actually, has my relationship been rocky for a while? Actually, where is this really impacting me in the now? And can I communicate to my specialist about this? But are there other people that I need to bring in and talk to? Which is why the cogs are really helpful, because it might be, well, actually, I could do with really having a conversation with HR, and that's not easy. Is there someone who can come and help me to do this? I need to really sit down and have a conversation with my partner. Who do I need to bring in to help me to do this? And when we have little children, people say it takes a village, right? And it's the same for us as adults. We often don't afford that for ourselves, but it's true. And the cogs kind of break that down, and they show us at different stages and different times where we need different elements of support. And it really does take a village to help us through.
Yeah, I think the other thing with peer support is that I found personally is meeting people that had been, obviously everybody's journey is unique, but meeting, but I had never met anyone else with Graves' disease before I joined peer support sessions. And then it was suddenly there was lots of other people that had Graves' disease. And whilst that's awful. It was in some ways just to meet someone else who could say, oh, well, I'm 5 years down my journey, or I'm 10 years down the line, and have those conversations. And it was just, it was ultra, like, life-changing for me in that respect.
And we hear that even, you know, with focus groups when we're doing research, particularly around rare diseases, or sometimes when we're looking at you know, more kind of common diseases like diabetes, but we work with people from underserved communities. You know, somebody said to me recently, we ran a South Asian women group to design an intervention, and somebody said, I've never spoken to anyone about my condition in my language before. You know, and that understanding, so that is really important, isn't it? So whether it's in research, whether we're getting involved in research or we're in peer support, it's quite therapeutic in itself to normalize our experience by saying, actually, I'm not the only one. I'm not weird. I'm not broken. I'm not
on my own.
I'm not on my own. Yeah, there are lots of us going through this. It's just geographically we tend to be quite spread out.
We're getting some really good feedback about your wave analogy, which I love as well. And the cogs, I've learned a lot from this. And lots of people have said how helpful they found the session, and thanking you for being so candid and addressing it.
Well, thank you as well. And I think, you know, when people think I'm going to get therapeutic support, people go straight to the thought of counselling, which is really helpful. But there are lots of different types of support that you can pull in. And as you say, with the cogs at different times for different problems that we're facing. So I'm just trying to give you a little overview of the different types of things that might be helpful. There are lots out there, but different things that might be helpful to address those specific problems. But it takes a little bit of time for ourselves to really, most of our referral appointments are 5 minutes, right? So it's making the most of those by knowing how to do that work to really guide our conversations and understand who we need at what point to support us. So
it's really useful just to learn to do some kind of relaxation or meditation, even if it's just for like a few minutes or 1 minute a day, rather than to wait to have a big counselling session. You can do some self-help and help yourself.
And actually, you know, mindfulness is a really useful practice. I use it regularly myself. And I remember being away for a weekend, visiting a family member who lives by a beautiful river. But there was something that was really troubling me in the week to come. And all I could think about was Wednesday. And every time I thought about Wednesday, my heart would sink and my anxiety would raise. And I was there planning all of the different possible outcomes and what might happen. And just using mindfulness, I was able to bring myself back to the now, even just for a second in the first time. And the more, I often say it's like a mother cat with her kittens in a box. And it's okay to let your kittens out, but sometimes just pop them back in the box and come back to now. And it's the same with the thoughts. We know they're there and we keep wandering to this dreaded moment or this conversation. We go, okay, come back to the now. What can I see? What can I hear? What can I smell? What's around me? Tell me something that I can see, but I'm really not taking in. And that's the beauty of mindfulness. And I was half expecting a dog to bark and builders to make noise, but that is the beauty of it as well, is that you can do it anywhere, and you don't have to clear the decks and clear your mind and clear the space. It's just about living our life in a moment of nows.
And it's really interesting to say that, because actually before I was diagnosed, I had one of my symptoms was awful anxiety, and the technique I used, not actually realizing that maybe it was mindful, was the grounding technique.
Yeah.
So I used to sit there and be like, I can see a tree, I can hear the tree, I can see this, and like just to try and shift the focus from this overwhelming, uncontrollable feeling that I was having at that particular moment.
Absolutely. And I think one of the beautiful things about the simple biopsychosocial model is that we can start to say, okay, I'm experiencing anxiety, but actually I have symptoms of an overactive thyroid. I have worries about going to work next week, and we can start to say, it does feel a lot, but I recognize that there's this anxiety coming from different places. I'm feeling quite bombarded. So I can start to use mindfulness to address the psychological anxiety. What do I really need to get down on paper to talk to my GP or my specialist about the medications that I can start to use to really start to think about the physiological anxiety? Socially, are there conversations I need to have? Are there changes I really need to make, but I'm just squashing down right now? And once the cupboard is full, they're just starting to fall out a little bit. And when we start to really unpick that massive ball of string, we can start to have little glimmers of ideas of where we can take action. It doesn't always have to be the most important issue, because sometimes they're the hardest to tackle, right? But the beauty of the cogs is we can sometimes tackle some of the smaller issues as well. And by oiling some of those, hopefully we can start to create some wiggle room in the middle.
Yeah, and I'd just say as well that on the beauty of having a peer community support network is that, especially when you've got chronic conditions, which a lot of thyroid patients do, you start to worry that your initial support network might get a bit fed up of hearing you say, I'm still feeling tired, or I'm still not feeling great about this particular aspect of something that's happening to me. And actually, in the peer support community, because the majority of those people have been on a journey themselves, they're much more sympathetic to that. And it takes away that concern, because that one things patients say to me all the time is, oh God, my husband must be sick of this, or my best friend's so fed up of me moaning about this. And actually it takes that pressure away.
That's so true, because I just got really worried that I was bothering everybody with my ailments all the time, my thyroid disease and Graves' disease. And you're absolutely right. If you go into the forums, everybody kind of just embraces you, and no question is too silly, and you can talk about anything. It's an amazing support.
Absolutely. And some people, the well-being flower, some people say, well, my health was really bad, but I did have that conversation at work, or I did make that change. I changed my job. I had that conversation with my partner, and actually our relationship has got much closer through this moment. So whilst this is scoring, I can change my scorings on other areas of my well-being. And feeling in a community is can be one of those petals too. And that's why peer support can be really helpful. My sense of community. Lovely.
Excellent. I don't think we've actually had any other particular questions around this particular topic, albeit I know it was something that I can see already that people are starting to share some of their own tips, people mentioning that they do yoga and stretching and all these other really nice sort of stress managing practices, which is really nice. And I know that there will be sharing on there as well some of the places and communities where you can find that peer support in regards to forums online. There are also online sessions, and there are some face-to-face sessions, I believe, still going. So we can put all that information in there as well. Are we going to be able, we'll check about sharing your diagram, because I thought the petal was a really good one as well, because it's that opportunity of sometimes when everything feels completely overwhelming and that everything feels quite negative, actually sometimes by doing that and focusing on the fact that actually, even though that's happening to me is really unpleasant right now, actually I'm still able to parent my children successfully, or sometimes it can be really small things, like I still managed to get up and I washed my hair this morning. It could be one of those things, but something's going well today.
Absolutely. What I can do is put together a list of where they're from, so that they're shared in their original links, and I can get those sent out as well.
That's great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having me,
Michelle.
Thank
you for coming. Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle and Louise and Justin. It was really nice for us all to hear you all, that discussion going on, and kind of sharing your experiences and experiences of people in the peer support groups that you do such great jobs with. And I think it resonates and rings lots of bells for all of us. And it's that ongoing reminder that we're not alone is always so important. It's been a really amazing day. It's been many months in the planning, and we were originally going to meet in person in Birmingham, but I think it's so much better that we were able to meet online, because it enabled so many more people to get together. And in busy lives, of course, it's not easy to travel halfway across the country, and we've even had people from different parts of the world, which is wonderful. This, as you know, this is all going to be recorded, and we can forward it on. There's been such a range of speakers today, and we've covered probably most of the main issues and questions that people have about the life course of thyroid eye disease and the knock-on effect it can have in your life. I hope it's answered lots of questions. There are many more. That on the Q&A session, you can see that several of the presenters spent a lot of time answering the questions. I think we've probably had about 100 questions, and they've all been answered, and we will do a transcript of them and share them. What's really striking to me is how hard, when listening to Yvonne and Lynn, and they're in really interesting sessions, how hard they had to work to get the information about change of diets that would make a difference to their treatment, and to persuade the doctors to let them work with them, to give them more time without starting different treatments, to give their time to make a difference. And also with Yvonne, she obviously had a lot of professional know-how as to how to access some of the trials that are going on that she'd read about. But that's tough, because most of us don't have the wherewithal that Yvonne did, or the perhaps kind of the time in our lives, or the energy, or know where to start with anything like that, and that dedication and perseverance. And so what we all would like is that for it to become easier in the future, that patients don't have to work so hard to find something which should be out there for them. And we know that the researchers who've got trials that are open, they want people to be recruited into them. So we just need to, I think we were saying earlier, it would be really great if from this day we could kind of find a better network of matching patients and studies and trials and doctors, and make sure that everybody gets involved as well as they can in order to kind of progress issues in this area. It's really exciting what all the research that is going on, but we all know there's more that needs to be done, and let's all hope, and I'm sure we're going to see lots of progress in the next few years. But with the support of this kind of amazing thyroid eye disease community, which you've kind of seen all come out today and get together today, hopefully progress can be quicker and will benefit more people as we go. And so I just thought it would be lovely to hear from Josie and Louise as well. And what were your reflections on today? Because we've all looked forward to bringing people together in this way and working together. And I'm really grateful for all your support building the day together. We'd love to hear what you think.
I think it's been great. I think it's been really great. I think it's always really positive when we can show the thyroid patient community the hope, the research that's going on, the advancements, the passion of the clinicians, and the dedication in terms of what's going on behind the scenes that I don't think patients always get an opportunity to see. So and if we can work together and continue to help provide that information, and like I say, join them together, then that's only going to be a positive.
I agree. Yeah. Josie, I think you're on mute, but I'd love to know what you think too.
Yeah, I say I feel quite emotional. When I started on my thyroid eye disease journey, I couldn't find any support apart from the American site. I don't even know how I came onto that. But the UK TED Forum's now got 2,500 patients that are all kind of helping each other, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'm getting loads of feedback off them saying how wonderful this session's been and how informative it's been. And it's just fantastic. So, and thank you, Julia Priestley, because you've done most of the organisation of this, and I'm really
Well, it's really exciting to know what together we can all do more in the future. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to Amgem Limited, who provided a grant to enable us to make this day happen. So we're really grateful for that. And there's a feedback survey that's going out after this. There'll be a reminder to complete the questionnaire as well. So any contributions about your thoughts of today, and also what you thought about that quality of life survey that we sent out before the event. We really would like to know more about what you thought that did and didn't do very well for you. If it didn't address the way you're feeling, then any suggestions would be helpful. And then we want to be able to build more support like this in the future. So please tell us on that feedback form what you'd like that support to look like in the future. Do you want live events in different parts of the country, where perhaps a road show going down around to different parts of the UK and having a smaller live event or online sessions like that, are they the most helpful? And what topics you'd like us to cover? So, you know, we'll look very carefully about all the things you tell us, and, you know, use that as the starting point for what we do for you over the next year. And we're really, really excited and inspired to do that. I haven't said yet, but a huge thanks to every single one of the speakers who've given up their time today. Everybody was provided kind of a different aspect of thyroid eye disease. Your expertise is invaluable to us to have access to. So thank you very much for the time. You've all taken time out of your extremely busy day lives to bring that to us today. The number of questions that have been asked throughout the day and the interactions in the chat, that's all extremely useful too. We'll obviously be able to go on to share those questions and the answers to it in the future, so future patients can have, and people who've missed the session today can learn about those. And it's all kind of, we wanted to design an interactive event. Even though we couldn't meet in person, we wanted to create something that we could all get together. And I think that this webinar has enabled us to talk to each other throughout it and find